Today's case will shock you. Arjun Mehta, an ambitious Indian student in Canada, used fake marriages to climb the ladder of success, but his greed led him into a deadly trap set by the women he deceived, Emma Walsh and Priya Sharma. If you want to stay updated with the most chilling true crime stories, hit that subscribe button and stay active on our channel now, because this story is one you cannot afford to miss. In 2012, Arjun Mehta left India with dreams far bigger than the small town he grew up in. His family had always believed he would be the one to lift them into a better life, and they sacrificed heavily to make it possible. His father sold a small piece of farmland, and his mother pawned her jewelry to help cover the tuition fees and first-year living expenses in Canada. For them, this was not just an education abroad, it was an investment in hope. Arjun promised them he would succeed, no matter the cost. Arriving in Toronto, the reality hit him harder than expected. The streets looked glamorous, but the cost of living was overwhelming. Rent consumed most of his budget, and part-time jobs offered little stability. He worked long hours in convenience stores and restaurants, often coming home exhausted with barely enough money to cover bills. Tuition, textbooks, and transport kept draining him, while back home his parents waited for him to send money. The pressure was relentless, and the sense of failure gnawed at him each day. Arjun was not lazy or unmotivated. He simply found himself caught in a system stacked against international students. Many around him were in similar situations, struggling quietly. But unlike them, Arjun carried a burning need to rise quickly. He wanted more than just survival. He wanted permanence, status, and wealth. As he sat in his cramped rented room, staring at unpaid bills and worrying about immigration deadlines, his mind began to drift toward shortcuts. He told himself that everyone bends the rules in one way or another, and if he wanted to stay in Canada, he would need to outsmart the system before it crushed him completely. Through late-night conversations with other students, Arjun began hearing whispers about a shortcut that seemed almost too convenient to be real. Many international students feared deportation once their study permits expired, and a few had discovered a way to stay without relying solely on grades or expensive work visas. It was the shadowy world of marriage for residency. At first, Arjun dismissed the idea as desperate and risky. But as the weeks passed and his financial stress grew, he began to see it as a lifeline. The process was surprisingly structured. Canadian citizens, often struggling with money themselves, would agree to a paper marriage in exchange for a large payment. To immigration officers, it looked like love. Behind closed doors, it was a cold contract. Arjun studied the rules carefully and realized that once he married a Canadian, he could apply for permanent residency, giving him the stability he craved. The cost was high, tens of thousands of dollars, but he reasoned that once settled, he would earn it back quickly. After searching through contacts, Arjun was introduced to Emma Walsh, a Canadian woman in her early 20s who had fallen into debt. Emma saw in Arjun a chance to climb out of financial ruin, while Arjun saw her as his ticket to permanence. They negotiated terms with precision, setting out payments and timelines. It wasn't romance, it was a calculated exchange. When they finally married in a quiet civil ceremony, it looked ordinary to outsiders. Behind the posed smiles and photographs was a hidden agreement. Arjun felt a rush of relief, believing he had outsmarted the system. What he didn't realize was that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to his downfall. The marriage between Arjun and Emma began like a performance, every move rehearsed to convince outsiders it was genuine. They posed for photographs in parks, celebrated birthdays with friends, and even shared a small apartment to satisfy immigration checks. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary young couple starting their life together, but behind closed doors the atmosphere was cold and distant. Emma knew exactly what the arrangement was, yet she expected Arjun to honor the payments they had agreed upon. For her, the deal was transactional, but she still hoped to be treated with respect. Arjun, however, quickly revealed where his priorities lay. He became consumed by money, constantly calculating expenses, making excuses for delays, and prioritizing his own ambitions over the promises he had made. Whenever Emma pressed him for the payments, he claimed financial hardship, saying he was waiting for a better job or needed more time. At first, she tolerated it, thinking his struggles were temporary, but as months passed, resentment began to grow. Their interactions became strained. Emma felt used, not only financially but emotionally, as Arjun rarely spoke to her outside the context of maintaining their cover story. Immigration officers could show up at any time, so they maintained appearances, but beneath the surface their partnership was crumbling. Arjun seemed less concerned about her feelings and more focused on the opportunities that his new status would eventually provide. Emma began to feel trapped in a situation she no longer controlled. The man who had promised her financial stability was now dragging her deeper into debt. While Arjun believed he was manipulating the system, he failed to see that his growing arrogance was leaving behind bitter scars that would not be easily forgotten. By 2015, Arjun's plan had worked. With permanent residency secured, he no longer needed Emma. Their marriage, once carefully staged for immigration officers, ended abruptly when he filed for divorce. Emma was left bitter, humiliated, and financially unstable. Arjun, however, walked away with a sense of victory. In his mind, he had beaten the system. What he didn't realize was that his triumph had planted seeds of anger in Emma that would not fade. With his legal status safe, Arjun felt untouchable. He reinvented himself as a man of ambition, telling everyone he was building business ventures and planning for success. His confidence drew people toward him, and soon he caught the attention of Priya Sharma, another international student. Unlike Emma, Priya wasn't aware of his past. She saw him as an ambitious, charming man who appeared well-connected and successful. To her, he was the image of the future she wanted: stability, security, and love in a foreign land where everything else felt uncertain. Arjun played the role perfectly. He took Priya to nice restaurants, spoke about his plans, and painted visions of a comfortable future. Priya was drawn in quickly, believing she had found someone reliable. What she didn't know was that Arjun had grown skilled at deception. He no longer needed fake marriages to secure status, but he still sought financial gain and control. Priya became his next target, a source of emotional and financial investment he could exploit. For Arjun, this was simply another chapter in his climb toward wealth. For Priya, it was the beginning of a nightmare. She had unknowingly stepped into the same cycle of manipulation that Emma had endured, only this time the consequences would prove even more devastating. At first, life with Arjun seemed exciting for Priya. He spoke with confidence, carried himself like someone destined for success, and always had a new idea or plan to talk about. But over time, the cracks began to show. He often disappeared for entire nights, returning with vague explanations about meetings or work that never quite added up. When Priya asked questions, he brushed them off with charm or irritation, depending on his mood. Slowly, her trust began to erode. Financial matters raised more suspicion. Arjun borrowed money frequently, claiming it was for urgent expenses or investments that would soon bring returns. Yet nothing ever materialized. Priya's savings dwindled, and her patience wore thin. The more she looked, the more inconsistencies she found. He claimed to be working full-time, but his bank statements told another story. He said he had business contacts, but none of them seemed real. The turning point came when Priya stumbled across old documents and emails stored carelessly on Arjun's laptop. Among them were remnants of his past with Emma, wedding photographs, legal papers, and even fragments of conversations about payments. Shock turned to dread as Priya pieced together the truth. She wasn't the first woman Arjun had deceived. The realization struck hard. She had fallen for a man who built his life on lies. Priya didn't confront him openly. Instead, she carried her anger silently, watching his every move and calculating her next steps. The betrayal cut deeper than she expected, and beneath her calm exterior, a dangerous determination grew. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She was planning her escape, but also something far more destructive than Arjun could ever anticipate. Priya's discovery of Arjun's past with Emma shifted everything. What began as heartbreak soon hardened into resolve. She knew leaving quietly would protect her, but the bitterness inside her refused to let go. The man who had stolen her money, her trust, and her peace of mind had to face consequences. Alone, she felt powerless, but when she reached out to Emma, the pieces of a dangerous plan began to fall into place. Emma had spent years carrying resentment toward Arjun. She had been left with debt and humiliation, while he walked away with permanent residency and new opportunities. Hearing from Priya was like reopening an old wound. but it also gave her a sense of purpose. Finally, someone else understood the depth of his deception. What started as long conversations about their shared experiences soon turned into discussions about justice. At first, they considered reporting him to authorities, gathering documents, and exposing his immigration fraud. Yet the more they spoke, the more their anger grew, and justice no longer felt like enough. Both women wanted him to feel the same pain he had caused. They believed the system would give him a slap on the wrist, nothing close to what he deserved. Revenge began to take shape in their minds as the only way to balance the scales. Together, they decided to lure him into a situation where his greed would betray him. For Emma and Priya, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, control, and retribution. They were no longer the victims of his schemes. They were becoming the architects of a plan that would transform their pain into something far darker. The plan took careful preparation. Emma and Priya knew Arjun's weaknesses better than anyone. They studied his routines, his habits, and his ambitions. They realized that his insatiable greed was the key to drawing him into their trap. They invented a business opportunity, claiming they had access to a lucrative import venture that required a small initial investment. Arjun's eyes lit up at the idea of quick profits, oblivious to the danger that awaited him. They sent him carefully crafted messages, outlining the potential returns and emphasizing how exclusive and secretive the opportunity was. Each detail was designed to appeal to his ego and reinforce his sense of invincibility. Arjun's ambition blinded him. He could not resist what appeared to be another step toward wealth and status. Every call, every email, and every meeting invitation was orchestrated to make him feel in control, yet he was walking into a world they had meticulously prepared. The chosen location was isolated, a warehouse on the outskirts of Mississauga. It seemed ordinary, industrial, and perfectly believable for a business meeting. To Arjun, it was the perfect setting to finalize what he thought would be an easy financial gain. He arrived confident, expecting cash or a signed contract, unaware that every inch of the space had been planned to corner him. When Arjun stepped inside, the atmosphere was different from the usual casual charm he manipulated so easily. Documents and photos from his past scams were displayed openly. The women stood behind the setup, silent but resolute. For the first time, he realized that the game had changed and that he was no longer the one in control. The trap had been set, and Arjun had fallen into it completely. Once Arjun realized the gravity of the situation, panic set in. The warehouse, which had seemed ordinary moments before, now felt like a cage. Evidence of his deception was spread across tables. Photographs from his marriage to Emma, emails detailing financial promises he had never kept, and bank statements revealing the borrowed money he had failed to repay. Each piece told a story of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. The women had anticipated his reactions, and every angle of the room reinforced the fact that he was exposed. Arjun tried to negotiate, to convince them that it was a misunderstanding, but his words carried no weight. His charm, which had deceived so many, had no power here. Emma and Priya were no longer victims. They were the orchestrators, and their anger was focused and unrelenting. As he moved toward the exit, looking for any possible escape, he discovered that the doors had been carefully secured. The trap was complete. The confrontation escalated quickly. Fear and desperation made Arjun reckless, and in the chaos that followed, the situation turned violent. What had started as a plan to humiliate and expose him spiraled into a deadly encounter. The details of the struggle were unclear, but the outcome was fatal. Arjun, the man who had once manipulated others to gain wealth and residency, met a violent end. His body was later discovered stuffed into a suitcase abandoned near Lake Ontario, a shocking reminder of how greed, deceit, and revenge can intersect with deadly consequences. The news of the discovery sent shockwaves through Toronto's South Asian community. Rumors and speculation spread quickly, as neighbors, friends, and classmates struggled to comprehend how a student's ambition and deceit could end in such a grim fate. The warehouse, once a symbol of opportunity, had become a stage for betrayal and death. The aftermath of Arjun's death sent ripples far beyond the immediate circle of those involved. Initially, police investigations were baffled. Neighbors reported suspicious activity at the warehouse, but no one could have predicted the shocking truth. Authorities first suspected gang involvement or a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't until digital footprints and careful examination of communications between Arjun, Emma, and Priya came to light that the true story began to emerge. Emma and Priya, once victims themselves, were quickly identified as central figures in the incident. The evidence revealed a calculated plan to lure Arjun into a trap, exploit his greed, and confront him with the consequences of his actions. Prosecutors argued that the women's anger, while understandable, had crossed the line into premeditated violence. Court proceedings revealed a narrative of betrayal, manipulation, and revenge that fascinated and horrified the public. Every detail of Arjun's past scams, the fraudulent marriage, and his exploitation of Priya was meticulously presented. The community struggled to reconcile the story. On one hand, Arjun had manipulated and deceived multiple women, exploiting immigration loopholes for personal gain. On the other hand, the actions of Emma and Priya resulted in a life lost, raising questions about justice, morality, and the cost of revenge. Both women were convicted, receiving lengthy sentences, their lives forever altered by the choices they had made in pursuit of retribution. The case became a cautionary tale for international students and immigrants, illustrating the dangers of shortcuts, deception, and unchecked ambition. Arjun's story, which began as a dream of opportunity, ended as a chilling reminder that greed and manipulation can spiral into destruction. The tragic sequence of events left a permanent mark on Toronto's South Asian community, serving as both warning and haunting memory for years to come.